CEO Millionaire watches twins sell toy car to save mom. Their lives will never be the same. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you believe in quiet courage and the love that holds a family together, and in the power of a small act to change everything, this story is for you. Let's begin. The fog had not yet lifted from the edges of the Mission District, casting the sidewalks in a sleepy gray haze that clung to cracked pavement and rusted lampposts. Market stalls had not opened yet, and the bakery across the street still smelled more like bleach than bread. But on the corner of Valencia and 22nd Street, beneath a faded mural of sunflowers and city birds, two small boys sat on an upturned milk crate, a single red toy car placed carefully between them like a sacred object. Everett Torres rubbed his thumb over the car's roof with a care that made it seem more fragile than it was. The edges of the car were chipped. The white racing stripe down the middle had faded to a soft pink, but it still rolled smooth, still clicked when you opened the doors. "Someone will want it," he whispered, not looking up. "It's fast, and it's red," Leo replied, which he'd always believed made anything more valuable. Red always looks faster. They had rehearsed what to say. Mateo would hold the car. Leo would talk. Their mother was still asleep when they slipped out the door that morning, coughing in her sleep and curled around her knees on the thin mattress she insisted was comfortable. They had left her a note. It was the last page of her sketchpad, written in Mateo's careful handwriting. "Went out. Don't worry. Get rest. We got it today." Leo looked around as the city slowly came alive. A man on a scooter zipped past with a coffee in one hand. A woman in business shoes was already arguing into her earpiece. An old man with two dogs crossed the street and muttered something about tourists. Mateo's stomach growled, but he said nothing. That was not what mattered. Not today. Their mom's pills were gone. The ones she took only when her back ached so badly that she could barely stand. She had told them she would be fine. That rest was the best medicine. But they had seen her wince when she tried to sit, had heard her crying when she thought they were asleep. Leo watched a woman pause at the crosswalk near them. He stood up quickly, holding the toy car toward her. "Excuse me, would you like to buy this car? It's really cool. The door's open and it still drives." The woman gave a polite smile but shook her head. "Sorry, sweetheart." Then she was gone. The next man didn't even look at them. The next three passed with only sidelong glances. "We need to try harder," Mateo said after half an hour. "Mom needs the medicine today." Leo was about to agree when he spotted a man in a dark coat crossing the street toward them. He was tall, his shoes looked expensive, and he had the kind of face that always looked like it was deep in thought, like he was somewhere else entirely. Now Leo whispered, "Go." Mateo stood holding out the car with both hands. "Excuse me, sir. Would you like to buy our car? It's really special." The man stopped. Not entirely just a subtle shift in his stride, but it was enough to make Leo's breath catch. The man turned his head slowly. His eyes landed on the toy car. And then everything about him froze. Not visibly, not loudly, but the change was there. He stared at the car like it wasn't a car at all, but something far more complex. His gaze narrowed slightly. He took a step closer. "Where did you get that?" He asked, his voice smooth but cautious. "We've had it forever," Mateo answered quickly. "It was a gift from someone at the shelter. Our mom used to volunteer there, before she got sick." "It still works," Leo added. "We don't want much. Just something to help our mom." The man crouched down. His fingers brushed the toy's side, then turned it over. His hand stilled. His jaw tightened just slightly. On the underside of the car, between the back wheels, were three faintly scratched letters. L.E. He stared at them for a long moment, then pulled out his wallet. He removed several bills, more than the boys had hoped for, and handed them over. "Will this help?" Mateo's eyes widened. "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." Leo nodded, his voice hushed. "This will help a lot." Mateo placed the car in the man's hand. His fingers hovered for a moment, reluctant. But he let go. "Thank you," he said. The man didn't answer at first. He watched them clutch the money and walk away quickly, their heads together. Then he turned toward a black car parked half a block down the road. Mr. Everett, his driver, asked, lowering the window. "Follow them, Graham?" Everett said. His tone was calm, but his heart was not. Inside his hand, the car's tiny frame felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. In all the years since Lily's accident, since the funeral, since the speech he gave about remembering her by giving her toys away to children who needed them, he had never once expected to see one again. Not like this. Not in the hands of two boys who looked far too old for their age and far too familiar in the curve of their frowns. He didn't believe in signs. He believed in math and code and perfect execution. But something about those twins made the air around him feel heavy. The car rolled slowly after the boys. Graham's mind raced through calculations. The odds of seeing this car again were 1 in thousands. The odds of it being carried by a family who clearly had once crossed paths with his company, perhaps his foundation made that even lower. They reached a low building near the corner of Shotwell Street. The boys disappeared inside. Paint peeled from the doors. A graffiti-tagged garbage bin sat beside a rusted bike frame. "Wait here," Graham told his driver. The stairwell smelled like dust and sour laundry. He climbed 2 flights, listening for voices. A door on the 3rd floor creaked open slightly. A small eye peered through. "It's the man from the park," Leo whispered over his shoulder. "The one who bought the car." The door opened a little wider. Mateo stood beside his brother, clutching the money. "Did we do something wrong?" "No," Graham said quietly. "Can I come in?" There was a pause. Then Leo nodded. The apartment was small. One room divided by a shelf that had once held books, but now held clothes folded neatly. A sketch pad lay open on the floor beside a cracked coffee mug. On a thin mattress near the window, a woman lay sleeping. Her hand trembled with each breath. Her face was pale, but she looked like she had once laughed easily. Graham stepped closer. "How long has she been like this?" "She got worse last week," Mateo said. "She says it's her back, but she won't go back to the hospital." "They said we needed insurance," Leo added. "We don't have that." Graham crouched beside her. Her skin was hot, her breathing shallow. He stood. "She needs help. Now." "We don't have," Mateo began, but Graham interrupted. "You already paid me," he said. "With the car. Now let me do my part." He carried her down the stairs, the boys trailing behind. Leo held her hand as they rode in the back seat, tears tracking quietly down his cheeks. Mateo sat silently, holding the bills between his hands like a fragile envelope. "Where are we going?" Mateo finally asked. "To people who can help her," Graham answered. As the car pulled onto the main road, Graham looked out the window. The city passed in a blur. Inside his pocket, the red car sat like a spark in the dark. Something had changed. He did not know what, but he knew this: he was no longer walking away. Not this time. The emergency room was humming with controlled chaos as Graham stepped through the glass doors, Sienna limp in his arms, and the twins pressed close behind. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils, but it was the frantic rhythm of beeping machines and whispered urgency that struck him hardest. It reminded him of another hospital, another day, one he had locked in the farthest corner of his mind. But there was no time for memories now. A nurse glanced up from the reception desk, her eyes widening at the sight of the pale woman in Graham's arms. "We need help here," she called, already on her feet. Another nurse appeared with a gurney, and together they eased Sienna onto it with practiced hands. Mateo reached for her hand. "She's burning up," he whispered, and the nurse nodded. "We'll take care of her, sweetheart." "Are you family?" another nurse asked, clipboard in hand. Graham hesitated, then said with quiet certainty, "Yes." The boys looked up at him surprised, but neither corrected him. The nurse nodded and led him toward a side counter. "We need basic information. Name, date of birth, insurance, if any." She glanced back at Sienna's gurney disappearing behind the swinging doors. "We can't treat without at least minimal consent." Graham reached for the pen. His hand paused over the line labeled relationship. He wrote one word: guardian. He glanced at the boys. Leo stood stiffly watching every move. Mateo clutched the straps of his backpack as if they might anchor him to the ground. "Come sit," Graham said, leading them to the nearest waiting chairs. "Your mom is in good hands now." They sat, but didn't relax. They leaned forward, eyes on the corridor, as if willing her to walk back out. An hour passed. Graham had made 3 phone calls, each time instructing someone on his staff to cancel meetings and delay calls. By the 4th message, his assistant had stopped questioning his absence. He sat with his elbows on his knees, fingers laced. The toy car was still in his coat pocket, warm from the heat of his body. Finally, a doctor approached. She was young, efficient, and calm, in a way that reassured people more than her words ever could. "Are you her husband?" she asked. "No," Graham replied. "I'm a friend." She nodded once. "Sienna's stable for now, but she's severely dehydrated and showing signs of possible kidney complications. We're running additional labs. Her body is clearly under long-term stress." Graham asked quietly, "Will she recover with proper treatment?" "Yes, but she'll need ongoing care. Dialysis may be required, and she's malnourished. This didn't start yesterday." Graham nodded. The doctor turned to the boys. "Are you her sons?" Leo nodded. "Twins," Mateo added. "Identical." The doctor offered a smile. "She talked about you. Even while drifting in and out, she kept saying your names." The boys' faces crumpled slightly, pride and fear at war. "Can we see her?" Leo asked. "Not yet," the doctor said gently. "But soon." As she walked away, Graham noticed the way Mateo leaned against his brother and how Leo's hand rested protectively over his twins. He had seen many forms of strength in boardrooms and negotiations, but this quiet solidarity in 2 boys who had barely seen 10 years was something different. Graham stood. "You'll come with me tonight," he said, the decision already made in his mind. "Your mom needs to rest, and I think you need a break from sleeping on floors." The boys exchanged looks. "You have a hotel?" Mateo asked. Graham gave a half smile. "Something like that." By the time the car pulled in front of the gates, Leo's mouth had dropped open slightly. Mateo sat straight, silent and still. The mansion stood beneath the sloping hills of Pacific Heights, its windows glowing warmly as dusk settled over the city. The long driveway was lined with trimmed hedges, and the fountain in front sprayed water in soft, rhythmic arcs. "This is your house?" Leo asked, as though trying to find the joke in it. "Yes." "Do you have a pool?" "Yes." "Do you use it?" "Almost never." Inside, the warmth and stillness was so complete it nearly swallowed them. Mrs. Loring, the housekeeper, met them at the entrance. Her gray hair was tied back, her posture as crisp as her uniform. She looked from the boys to Graham and said only, "Guest rooms are already prepared, sir." Graham nodded. "We'll eat something light, then the boys can rest." The twins followed him down the marble hallways, their footsteps soft against rugs that looked older than they were. The guest suite had twin beds, soft blankets, and lamps that glowed a warm gold. "Bathrooms through there," Graham said. "I'll have clothes brought up. Pajamas, too, unless you prefer to sleep in jeans." Leo blinked. "This is real," very Graham said, "but only temporary, until your mother is well again." Dinner was simple, soup and bread. Graham sat with them while Mrs. Loring served. The boys ate quietly at first, then slowly with growing comfort. "You have paintings on your ceiling," Mateo said, looking up at the dining room's mural, "like a museum." Graham smiled. "I used to think it was impressive. Now it mostly reminds me how quiet this place has been." "You live here alone?" Leo asked. Graham nodded. "It used to feel like enough." Later that night, the house settled into its usual hush. Graham stood at the window of his study looking out at the distant city lights. The toy car sat on the windowsill now. He picked it up, turned it over again. L.E. Lily Everett. His daughter had been 6. Had loved toy cars more than dolls. He had bought her the set for Christmas the year before the accident. After her death, he couldn't bear to keep them. donated the full collection anonymously to the Hope Rise shelter. That shelter had hosted dozens of children over the years. One of them somehow must have been Sienna. He should have recognized her. Her name had been on scholarship paperwork years ago. A top architecture student. Creative. Bold. He remembered signing the award letter, but he had never met her in person. And now, years later, she lay in a hospital bed because life had failed her. Or maybe because he had. A soft knock broke his thoughts. He opened the door to find Mateo standing barefoot, his small frame wrapped in the oversized shirt Mrs. Loring had found. "Sorry," Mateo said. Do you think our mom's okay?" Graham crouched slightly, meeting his eyes. "Yes," he said. "I truly think she will be." Mateo nodded once. "We can pay you back." Leo said we should. For the ride. And the food. "You already did," Graham said, tapping the toy car gently. "You gave me this." Mateo looked puzzled. "It's just a car." Graham looked back down at it. "Not to me." Mateo tilted his head. "Did it used to be yours?" "It belonged to someone I loved very much." Mateo didn't ask who. He just nodded and whispered, "Thank you," before slipping back to bed. Graham stood in the hallway for a long moment, the cool tiles beneath his feet, the weight of the past pressing softly against his chest. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a museum. It felt like something else. Like a place where something might begin again, something messy, loud, alive. As he turned off the study lights, he left the toy car on the windowsill where the morning sun might find it, just as something had found him that day in the park, something small and red and impossible to ignore. Hang on a second. If you're finding meaning here, please take a moment to subscribe. You help keep this channel going with every click. Let's continue. Morning light poured through the tall windows of the guest room, brushing across the twin beds, where Leo and Mateo Torres stirred beneath unfamiliar soft blankets. Mateo was the first to open his eyes, blinking against the brightness and the silence that surrounded them. For a brief second he forgot where he was. The sheets were warm. The mattress did not creak beneath him. There was no whirring from the broken fan back in their old apartment, no car alarms, no coughing, just the steady hum of comfort. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. Across from him, Leo was already awake, staring at the ceiling as if trying to memorize the painting above them. "This place is weird," Leo said. "It smells like candles and something fancy." Mateo nodded. "I forgot what it felt like to wake up and not be cold." They dressed in the clothes that had been left on the dresser. Clean, soft shirts, jeans with no holes, and socks that matched. Leo pulled at the collar of his shirt like it didn't quite belong to him. "We look like kids from one of those family magazines," he muttered. They ventured out into the hallway, peering down the long corridor that branched like a maze. Paintings hung on the walls, thick frames that looked older than both of them combined. Sunlight spilled across the floors, and for a moment they stood still, unsure of what they were allowed to touch. Mrs. Loring appeared from around the corner holding a laundry basket. She raised an eyebrow at them. "Breakfast is in the kitchen. You two remember where that is?" Mateo nodded. "We can find it. Your mother called this morning." She added, her voice softer. "She's stable. The doctor said you can visit this afternoon." Leo's face brightened instantly. "Really, really? But first, food." The kitchen was already buzzing with quiet energy. Graham sat at the long table, a steaming mug of coffee in front of him, a laptop open to a spreadsheet he barely glanced at. When the twins walked in, he looked up and offered a small smile. "Good morning. Sleep well?" "Yes," Mateo said. "The beds are like clouds," Leo added, sitting down across from Graham. "Mrs. Loring says we can see Mom today." "That's right," Graham said. "After lunch. I'll drive you myself." The boys exchanged glances. "Why are you doing all this?" Leo asked, not accusing, just curious. "Most people pretend not to see us." You didn't." Graham considered the question. The coffee in his mug had gone cold. Sometimes, he said slowly, "We don't realize how empty our lives have become until something unexpected shakes us awake." "Like us?" Mateo asked. Like a red toy car, Graham replied, and Leo chuckled softly. After breakfast, the boys explored the house under Graham's half-watchful eye. He had postponed meetings for the morning again, unable to explain to himself why being near them felt more necessary than any quarterly report. The twins discovered a library bigger than their old apartment, a sunroom filled with plants that made Leo sneeze twice, and a hallway lined with old black-and-white photographs. But the door at the far end of the west wing caught Mateo's attention. It was simple, white, closed. But something about the way it sat so still, so untouched, made it feel different from the others. He reached for the handle. It didn't budge. Mateo Graham's voice echoed gently down the hall. "That room stays closed." Mateo turned quickly, hand falling to his side. "Sorry, I didn't know." Graham stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "It's not just a room, it's personal, off limits. Everything else is yours to explore." Mateo nodded. "We understand." He didn't ask again. That afternoon, the boys sat quietly in the back seat of Graham's car as they drove toward the hospital. The city passed by in glimmers and flashes. When they arrived, a nurse greeted them with a warm smile and led them to Sienna's room. She was sitting up, color returning to her cheeks, though her arms still looked too thin and her eyes too sunken. The moment she saw her sons, her face lit with such fierce love that Graham had to look away for a second. "Mom," Mateo whispered, rushing to her side. Leo followed, wrapping his arms around her carefully. "You're really okay, I am now," she whispered, her voice still raspy. "Are you both all right? Where did you sleep? Did you eat?" "We're fine," Leo said. "We stayed with Mr. Everett. He has a house the size of a school." Sienna's eyes moved past her boys to where Graham stood near the door. "I didn't expect this." "Neither did I," Graham said honestly. "But here we are." The doctor entered then and explained the treatment plan. Sienna would need regular dialysis for the next few weeks. She could be discharged in a few days, but only if she had a clean and stable environment to rest in. Graham assured them she would. The nurse handed him more forms. He signed them all without hesitation. "You don't have to do this," Sienna said later after the boys had gone to the cafeteria. "We're used to managing on our own." "That's not a badge of honor," Graham replied. "I know what it's like to build walls around yourself. But they don't protect. They isolate." "You talk like someone who knows," she said, studying him. "I do." Back at the house, the boys returned to their explorations. Graham resumed half working from his study, though more often than not he found himself listening for the sound of footsteps, quiet laughter, or the clatter of something accidentally knocked over. When the silence stretched too long, he would go searching only to find the twins sprawled on the carpet building towers out of hardcover books, or attempting to play chess on an antique board they had unearthed from the library shelf. "Do you play?" Leo asked one evening, setting the pieces carefully. "I used to." "Will you teach us maybe tomorrow?" Graham said, closing his laptop. That night he found himself standing in front of the locked door. The hallway was quiet. He held the key in his palm, unmoving. 5 years had passed. He hadn't stepped into that room since the accident, not once, not even to dust. Mrs. Loring had orders to leave it untouched. The handle felt cool under his hand, but he didn't turn it. Not yet. The next day brought news that Sienna would be discharged soon. The doctor's tone was cautiously optimistic. She had responded well to the treatment, but she would need weeks of recovery. Graham arranged everything: prescriptions, follow-up appointments, even a private nurse for weekly check-ins. He didn't ask permission. He simply ensured it was done. When Sienna returned home, though, she paused when she realized that was what this place had started to feel like. The boys greeted her with the kind of glee that made her eyes shine with tears. Mateo showed her the guest room prepared for her. Leo pulled her toward the kitchen to show off the view from the bay windows. Graham stood a short distance away, unsure of where he fit into the reunion, until Sienna turned to him and said, "Thank you. I don't know how to repay any of this." "You don't have to," he said quietly. "Your sons already have." She looked puzzled. He didn't explain. That evening, for the first time, they all sat down to dinner together. Sienna at the head of the table, the boys talking over each other. Graham listening with the quiet patience of someone rediscovering a language he had not spoken in years. They talked about school, about music, about which tree in the garden looked the most like a dragon. Sienna laughed softly, her eyes glowing. After dinner, Mateo paused outside the west hallway. "Mr. Everett?" he asked. "That room at the end, was it your daughter's?" Graham stopped. The hallway was quiet again. Still. The house always seemed to hold its breath when the name hovered near. "Yes," he said. "Her name was Lily." Mateo nodded. "Was she our age?" "She was 6 when she passed." Leo appeared beside his brother, silent. "We won't go in," he said. "But I think she would like that we're here." Graham said nothing for a long moment. Then he placed his hand gently on Mateo's shoulder. "So do I." Then he turned and walked away. But later that night, long after the boys had fallen asleep and Sienna's soft breathing could be heard from the guest room, Graham stood once again in front of the locked door. This time the key was in the lock. And this time, he turned it. The key turned with a soft click that seemed louder than anything else in the silent house. Graham Everett stood motionless for a moment, his hand still on the doorknob, his breath caught halfway between resolve and fear. The hallway behind him remained quiet. The soft tick of the antique clock from the stairwell filtered faintly through the air, but even that seemed to hesitate. Then slowly he pushed the door open. The room hadn't changed. It was as if time had sealed itself inside. Pale blue walls still held the glow-in-the-dark stars Lily had insisted on placing in perfect constellations. A bookshelf in the corner sagged gently under the weight of picture books, early readers, and a few slim science encyclopedias. The curtains were drawn, but light filtered in around their edges, casting a gentle gold over the spaceship-patterned comforter on the small bed. Her favorite stuffed giraffe sat propped against the pillow, tilted slightly, as if it had been listening all this time. Graham stepped in. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. His footsteps were muffled by the plush rug shaped like a cloud. He walked to the nightstand and picked up the framed photograph that had waited there patiently for 5 years. Lily, barely 6, grinning with both front teeth missing, her arms looped tightly around his neck, while his wife Evelyn smiled from the background, holding up the toy car set they had given Lily for Christmas. That was the last photo. Taken 2 days before the accident. Taken before everything fell apart. His fingers brushed the edge of the frame. For years he had sealed this place off. Closed the door. Pretended moving forward meant shutting everything behind him. But lately, since meeting Leo and Mateo, since carrying Sienna into that hospital, something had shifted. The silence no longer comforted him. It pressed in. The boys' voices, the way Mateo whispered when unsure, and Leo puffed his chest when nervous, the way Sienna laughed, even when it turned into a cough. That noise had started to mean something. It had started to feel like music. He sat on the edge of Lily's bed. His hand ran over the comforter, tracing the shapes of rockets and stars. He closed his eyes, and for a moment the memory came, her little footsteps running down the hall, her giggles as she showed him the car that could flip over and land on its wheels every time. He had called her fearless. She had said, "I have a car and a cape, Daddy. I can go anywhere." A voice pulled him from his thoughts. Mr. Everett Graham turned quickly. Leo stood in the doorway, not stepping inside. His face was open, respectful, curious, but cautious. I saw the door was open. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," Graham said. "You can come in." Leo stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning the room. He walked to the bookshelf and ran his fingers along the spines. She liked space stuff. Everything about it. She used to say she was going to be the first girl to build a rocket and then fly it herself. "That's cool," Leo said. "Mateo wants to be a pilot. I think he likes flying because it feels free." Graham nodded. Lily said the same thing. Leo paused. "Did you give the car to the shelter after?" "Yes," Graham said, his voice low. "All of them. I couldn't keep them then. We got it from a lady at the shelter. She said it was from someone important. Mateo always kept it clean." Graham looked down at his hands. It was hers. That red car. She must have been awesome, Leo said. I think she would have liked us. She would have, Graham said, a sudden tightness in his chest. Later, after Leo had gone to find his brother, Graham remained in the room a little longer. He did not cry. But something loosened in his chest. Something that had been locked tighter than this door. He stood and walked to the closet. Inside, old dresses, tiny shoes, and a row of jackets still hung neatly. At the bottom, a large plastic bin held drawings and school papers, all carefully stored. He did not open it, not yet. But he did place the red toy car gently on the shelf above the bed, its place reclaimed. Downstairs, the house felt different. Alive. Lived in. Mateo was sitting at the kitchen island helping Mrs. Loring cut strawberries while Leo tried to figure out the espresso machine by pressing every button that made a noise. Graham joined them for dinner, and this time he cooked. Not well. Not with confidence, but enough. Pasta from a jar, garlic bread from the oven, a salad that Leo called green stuff with attitude. Sienna laughed for the first time in days. Her eyes were brighter, though her steps remained slow, and her voice still came with effort. Thank you, she said as the boys cleared their plates. For everything. I don't know what else to say. You don't owe me anything, Graham replied. That's not how this works. You barely know us. I know enough. The following week brought small changes that didn't feel small at all. Sienna began walking around the garden in the mornings, leaning on a cane Graham had ordered for her after seeing her stumble once. The boys started homeschooling with the help of an online tutor and insisted on showing Graham everything they learned, even if he was in the middle of a video call. He stopped minding. He found himself waking earlier, going to bed later, not because of work, but because he wanted to know if Mateo had finished his model airplane, or if Leo had managed to beat Mrs. Loring at chess. One evening, Sienna found Graham sitting on the back patio, a cup of tea in his hands. She eased herself into the chair beside him. The garden lights flickered softly, casting a golden wash across the leaves. The boys love it here, she said. They've never had anything like this before. Not even close. They deserve it. So did you once, she said quietly. He turned to her. She was watching him, not with pity, but understanding. You gave everything up, didn't you? I didn't mean to, he said. But after Lily, I didn't know how to live anymore. And now I think I'm remembering. She smiled gently. I want to work again, when I'm stronger. I want to design, build things. That's all I ever wanted to do. You'll do it, Graham said. I have no doubt. The boys will ask to stay. When it's time to leave, they'll want to stay. Do you? She hesitated. I don't know. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. I've never needed anyone's charity. It's not charity, Graham said. It's choice. Whose ours? Mine, yours, the boys. Together. Sienna looked down at her hands. They're already calling you Mr. Everett less and less. I heard Mateo call you just Everett earlier. It's only a matter of time. Graham smiled. I don't mind. It's better than some of the names I've been called in board meetings. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with things not yet said, with questions still forming, and answers not ready to be spoken. But something had shifted again. The door had opened, and now something new was coming in, something that felt a lot like hope. Just a gentle pause. Please, if this story touched your heart, take a second to subscribe. It means everything to us, and helps keep the channel going. Let's continue. A soft drizzle fell over San Francisco that morning, silvering the city in a quiet mist that blurred rooftops and softened the sharp lines of buildings. Graham Everett stood at the tall window in his study, the steam from his coffee curling upward as he watched the rain fall against the glass. Behind him, the house murmured with early morning sounds, Leo and Mateo arguing gently about who had left the toothpaste cap, off Sienna's slow footsteps crossing the hallway, the click of Mrs. Loring preparing breakfast downstairs. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Sienna had returned from the hospital. 3 weeks of routines forming naturally of laughter, returning in bits and pieces of silence no longer meaning loneliness. Graham had never intended to host a family in his home, never imagined his days would revolve around math worksheets and dinner conversations about whether turtles could survive on spinach alone. But now the idea of returning to the way things had been before, the perfect silence, the empty house, the nights where only the sound of his own breath filled the darkness, seemed unimaginable. He set down the coffee cup and turned toward his desk, flipping open the laptop that had been idle since the night before. His inbox had ballooned again. His executive team had handled his reduced presence well, but questions were building. Investors wanted assurance. There was a pending merger proposal that required his signature. He skimmed through the flagged messages, intending only to clear a few before breakfast, when a subject line caught his eye. Follow-up on HR policy termination, project file attached. He opened the document. It was an internal memo dated nearly 6 years ago regarding the termination of a freelance architectural designer contracted through a third-party firm associated with one of Everett Tech's expansion projects. The reason given: excessive absences and failure to disclose a medical condition. The name listed in bold letters made the air shift around him. Everett Torres. He stared at the screen for several seconds, the lines of the memo swimming slightly. Then he scrolled down. His own name appeared at the bottom of the page. Not a signature, not a direct order, but a standard administrative approval on a quarterly HR summary document. He had initialed it, likely never noticed her name among the dozens listed. It had been routine, paperwork, policy. He sat back in his chair. The rain tapped harder against the windows now, as if echoing his heartbeat. He had helped write the company's early HR protocols. He had insisted on professionalism and transparency. But never had he imagined that those protocols would one day be used to cut off a pregnant, overworked young woman who had been too scared to admit she was sick, and certainly not someone he had once personally selected to receive a scholarship. The red car returned to his mind again. Not just a toy. Not just a coincidence. A breadcrumb that had led him to this reckoning. That evening, Graham watched as the twins spread out their homework at the dining room table, each vying for space and attention. Mateo was building a volcano for science class using modeling clay and an old soda bottle. Leo was copying vocabulary words into a notebook, pausing to draw little explosions next to every fourth word. Sienna sat with her legs curled beneath her on the couch, a notepad balanced on one knee. She had started sketching again. Graham saw her notebook open to a drawing of a garden with arched trellises and winding paths. The space looked familiar. It was the side yard just beyond the guest room windows. She had reimagined it entirely. He watched her pencil move and felt something inside him ache in a way that was not pain, but something more like recognition. After dinner, when the twins were in their room and Mrs. Loring had retired for the night, Graham found Sienna alone in the study, examining the framed photographs on his wall. She turned when he entered. "She had your smile," she said quietly, gesturing toward the picture of Lily perched on Graham's shoulders. But her mother's eyes. She was fierce, Graham said. When she wanted something, she would not stop until she got it. "I think she would have liked you." Sienna smiled faintly, then grew serious. "You've been quiet all day." Graham hesitated, then walked to the desk and retrieved the printed memo he had tucked into a folder earlier. He handed it to her. "I think you should see this." She took the paper, read it silently. Her face did not change at first. Then her jaw tightened. Her fingers curled slightly at the bottom of the page. "So, this is how it happened. The project was under your umbrella." "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I signed off on a stack of termination summaries. I didn't read every name." "That's not an excuse, but it is the truth. It wasn't just a job," she said quietly. "It was our only income. I was 5 months pregnant. I missed 3 days for doctor appointments, and they accused me of hiding my condition. I didn't have the strength to fight." "I failed you," he said. "You were one of the best scholarship recipients we ever had. I should have paid more attention." She looked down at the memo. "I thought it was just bad luck. I blame myself. For not being strong enough. For not working through the pain. For getting sick." "It wasn't your fault," Graham said. "It was mine. Or at least the system I created. The system I thought was fair. You believed in clean lines, clear rules. I did. But life isn't clean, and people don't fit inside rules. She sat down slowly, her hand still holding the paper. I forgave you a long time ago, before I even knew it was you, because holding on to it was heavy. Too heavy for a mother trying to raise twins alone. Graham sank into the chair opposite her. I've made a lot of money, built a lot of systems, but I don't think I understood what it meant to really live. Not until the day your sons offered me a toy car in the park. She looked at him then. Really looked. And he felt seen. Not as a CEO, not as a man with regrets, but as someone trying imperfectly, belatedly to do better. You saved us, she said, but we also saved you. That's what scares me, he said, because now I don't know how to let go. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets shimmered under the glow of street lamps. The city, so often a backdrop of noise and steel, now looked soft like a painting still drying on the easel. Graham reached into the drawer beside his desk and pulled out a box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a ring. Simple. Silver. A vintage piece that had once belonged to his grandmother. He did not open it. Not yet. He simply held it in his palm and looked at her. I don't want this to end when you're well, he said. I don't want it to be just a chapter. I want it to be something more. Sienna's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. She didn't speak yet either. She simply placed her hand over his, over the box, and let the silence answer for both of them. In the hallway outside, Leo whispered through the keyhole of the guest room. Do you think he's going to ask her? Matteo replied, If he doesn't, I will. She deserves someone who brings her pancakes and buys her real socks. They giggled, then fell quiet, then whispered again, Do you think we get to stay? In the study, Graham opened his hand. The box remained closed, but everything else finally was beginning to open. The following weeks passed like pages in a story none of them had expected to live. Morning sun found its way through the old bay windows and warmed the kitchen as Graham stirred oatmeal with one hand and reached across the counter to open juice boxes with the other. The twins tumbled into the dining room each morning, still half asleep, but ready with questions that had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with the important matters of their world. Can turtles survive on pancakes? Who would win in a race between a cheetah and a bicycle? And when exactly they would be allowed to use the telescope in the observatory room upstairs? Sienna had regained more color in her cheeks and more strength in her steps. She had stopped coughing in the middle of the night and had even joined Graham and the boys outside on the back patio for chess tournaments and marshmallow roasting over the built-in fire pit. She was drawing again, not just for herself, but for purpose. Graham had offered her a quiet room on the second floor to turn into a design studio, and she had taken it. Half of the sketches already lining the corkboard were plans for community shelters, women's co-housing models, and one elegant redesign of the shelter where she had once volunteered. She called them healing spaces. Graham called them blueprints for something better. The mansion no longer felt like a house on pause. It pulsed with a rhythm that came from laughter down hallways, music playing from the boys' tablets, footsteps running across polished floors, and the clatter of dinner plates as everyone fought over who got the last bread roll. Graham, for the first time in years, was missing fewer meetings and yet caring more about the outcomes. He took calls in the garden with Leo hanging upside down from a tree branch behind him, and Matteo explaining that he had discovered a worm with 3 segments and named it Edison. Investors noticed the shift. Some questioned it. Others said he seemed steadier, clearer, even lighter, but no one really knew what had changed. Not yet. One crisp Saturday morning, as Graham was walking back from the mailbox at the end of the long driveway with a stack of letters tucked under his arm, he found Leo and Matteo sprawled on the front steps, surrounded by glue sticks, glitter, and poster board. We're making signs, Matteo explained. For what, Graham asked. To welcome Mom's friend from the nonprofit place, Leo added. She's coming to talk to her about a job. I didn't know you were planning to work again already, Graham said, glancing toward the front door. She didn't either, Matteo said with a sly grin. We scheduled it for her. Inside, Sienna stood in the kitchen looking through the pantry and muttering that she should have made something more impressive than scrambled eggs for brunch. "They scheduled it?" Graham asked, stepping into the doorway. "They're convinced I'm ready," she said, shaking her head with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "I told them I needed more time." "Are they wrong?" Graham asked. "Maybe not," she admitted. "But I don't want them to think I'm planning to leave either. I haven't said anything because I don't know what staying means yet. Not just staying here in this house, but in your world." Graham walked over and placed the mail on the counter. "What if it's not my world anymore? What if it's becoming ours?" Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Leo shouted from the front hallway, "She's here. We cleaned the chairs. Mostly." Sienna took a deep breath, wiped her hands on a kitchen towel, and squared her shoulders. Graham watched her go. She had never needed anyone to hold the door open for her, but still he followed. The meeting with the nonprofit representative went well. They offered Sienna a remote project coordinator role for a series of city-wide housing initiatives, flexible hours, paid training, and room for advancement. The boys hovered nearby with wide eyes and proud grins. When the guest left and the house settled again, Sienna turned to Graham. "They're going to offer me a full-time position in a few months. They think I could help redesign how they approach transitional spaces." "Of course you could," he said. "You're the best person for it." She hesitated. "It'll mean more time away, more calls, more responsibilities." "You don't have to explain," he said. "You don't need permission to build a life." That night, after the boys were asleep and the last of the dishes had been washed, Graham and Sienna sat on the back patio. The sky was clear. The moon hung low and a breeze moved gently through the trees. Sienna rested her head on his shoulder. "They're asking questions," she said. "The boys, about the future, about what this is. They heard someone at the grocery store call me your girlfriend, and Mateo asked if that made you their stepdad now." Graham smiled softly. "And what did you say I told them? It's complicated. That love doesn't always follow labels. Maybe it's time we made it less complicated." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small object wrapped in a velvet cloth. Sienna sat up, eyes narrowing. "You said you weren't going to propose until I beat you at chess." "You're getting close," he said, "but I'm starting to think I'm stalling on purpose." She opened the cloth. Inside was a ring, simple and timeless. Not flashy, not loud, just honest. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he said. "I just want you to know where I stand. And I want them, Leo and Mateo, to know that nothing about this was ever temporary for me." The next morning, Sienna wore the ring on a chain around her neck. The boys noticed within 5 minutes. "Is that—" Leo started. "Are you guys married now?" Mateo asked. "Not yet," Sienna said. "But someday, if we all agree." "I agree," Leo said immediately. "Can I call him Dad now?" Mateo asked. "Only if he's okay with it." They both turned to Graham. He knelt in front of them, suddenly more nervous than he had ever been walking into any boardroom. "I would be honored," he said. Later that week, Graham attended a charity gala hosted by the Everett Foundation. He had not made a public appearance in months, but this time he arrived with Sienna on his arm, and Leo and Mateo walking confidently beside them in matching navy suits. Reporters buzzed. Flashes popped. People whispered. Graham gave no press statements, but he smiled. He held Sienna's hand. He made introductions that included the words, "This is my family." One of the board members approached him with wide eyes. "We've been wondering what happened to you these past few months." "Now we see. You've been living again?" "Yes," Graham said, "exactly that." The next morning, the newspapers ran a photo of the four of them at the gala. The headline read, "Reclusive Tech Titan Reemerges with a New Legacy." The article speculated about the mystery woman, about the twin boys, about whether Everett Technologies would shift direction, now that its founder seemed recentered around something far more human than capital. Back at the mansion, the boys clipped the article and taped it to the refrigerator. "We're famous now," Leo said. "Do you think we'll get a fan club?" Mateo asked. "Only if you finish your homework," Sienna said, kissing the tops of their heads. Graham watched from the doorway, his arms crossed loosely over his chest, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He had spent his life building systems, mastering equations, optimizing growth. But none of that had prepared him for the mess and beauty of family. He didn't need to prepare. He only needed to show up. And he would. Every day. For all of them. Because some legacies are built in silence and marble. But the best ones are built in the sound of laughter echoing through a house that no longer feels empty. In the soft goodnights spoken down a hallway lined with life. In the red toy car that still sat on his bookshelf, now scratched and faded, but still the spark that had turned everything around. Just a short moment before we continue, please subscribe if this story moved you. Your support truly keeps the lights on for us. Now let's return to the story. The scent of fresh paint lingered faintly in the front hallway of the mansion as sunlight streamed in through the high windows, catching on dust motes that swirled gently in the morning stillness. Sienna stood near the entry table, adjusting a small vase of sunflowers the boys had picked from the garden earlier that week. Her sketch pad lay nearby, open to a nearly finished design of the updated shelter space she had been volunteering to help transform. The design had caught the attention of the nonprofit's directors. A project that had begun as a temporary proposal had quietly grown into something bigger, permanent, funded, real. Down the hallway, Graham was on a call in the study, pacing slowly as he spoke. His voice, low and deliberate, carried only faintly past the thick oak door. Sienna could not make out the words, but she recognized the rhythm. Business negotiations never left Graham's blood completely, even now, even with flour sometimes dusting his shirts from impromptu pancake sessions and twin boys tying his shoelaces together for laughs. The CEO still lived inside him, but he was softer now. Less armor, more curiosity. And she had seen him smile more in the last month than in all the press photos she had ever seen before. The boys burst into the hallway, suddenly a blur of energy and mismatched socks. Mateo carried a tablet and a crumpled permission slip. Leo had a paper crown on his head and a popsicle stick wand in his hand. "Mom, we need your signature," Mateo said breathlessly. "It's for the science fair next weekend. We want to enter as a team." "We're building a wind-powered car," Leo added. "It'll be better than the volcano. Everyone always does a volcano. That's basic. We're going to test it on the driveway," Mateo said. "Can we please?" "Only if you promise not to roll it under Mr. Everett's car again, like last time," Sienna said, with raised eyebrows. "He almost reversed over your invention." "We put a cone there," Leo defended. "It was a safety measure. The cone was made of a cereal box and duct tape," Sienna said, signing the form anyway. "Just be careful." Graham emerged from the study just as they dashed back toward the garage. "What did I miss?" he asked. "They're building a wind-powered car," Sienna said, tucking the signed paper into Mateo's backpack. "Expect the leaf blower to go missing any minute now." Graham chuckled. "I'll have the mechanic on standby." She smiled and turned to head toward the kitchen, but paused when she noticed a red folder tucked under Graham's arm. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That looks suspiciously serious." "It is," he admitted, offering it to her. "It came this morning, from the Foundation's legal team." She took the folder and opened it slowly. Inside were several documents neatly clipped with typed headers and embossed logos. Her fingers stopped on the first page. "Application for permanent board appointment. Sienna Torres." "What is this?" she asked quietly. "It's an invitation," he said. "Officially. To join the Everett Foundation's leadership board as the head of design and outreach for housing development. The position is real, with voting rights, with a budget, with a team. I'm not—" She paused. "I'm not qualified for something like this. I've never even led a team before. You've led 2 boys through years of survival and strength. You redesigned an entire community housing model in 4 weeks. You've already done the job. This just gives it a title. You're serious completely." She looked down at the paper again, then back up at him. "You really believe I can do this? More than I've believed in anyone in a long time." She did not answer right away. She held the folder tightly and walked to the back patio where the light was gentler, and the sound of the boys laughing in the garden wrapped around her like a promise. She sat in the wicker chair by the potted rosemary plant and read every page twice. When she finally returned inside, she found Graham at the kitchen island flipping through a recipe book the boys had brought home from the library. "What are the chances I can make banana bread without bananas?" he asked as she stepped into the room. "Zero," she said, "but I'll help." He glanced up, searching her face. "You read it, I did." And she stepped closer and rested the folder on the counter between them. "I want to do it. I think I'm scared, but I want to do it anyway." "That's how you know it matters," Graham said. That weekend, the twins unveiled their wind-powered car in front of a small crowd in the school gymnasium. The other projects were neatly labeled and mostly static dioramas models of DNA papier-mâché planets. But Leo and Mateo's contraption was cobbled together from plastic tubing, an old skateboard, a fan motor, and enthusiasm. When they activated the propeller, the car shot forward, zipped off the table, and crashed spectacularly into a wall. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. The boys bowed dramatically. "Did we win?" Mateo asked on the way home. "You won attention," Sienna said, and Joy Graham added. "And some duct tape," Leo said. "But we're going to rebuild it." That night, the four of them ate dinner on the back patio under string lights Graham had finally agreed to hang. The garden buzzed with summer insects. The table was cluttered with dishes and a forgotten chessboard where Mateo had beaten Graham 3 moves earlier than usual. "You know," Graham said, sipping his tea, "I've been thinking." "Uh-oh," Sienna said. "Here comes a plan." "No, a question," he said. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the velvet box again, this time placing it in the center of the table. The boys went still. Sienna looked at him, eyes wide. "I know we've talked about it in the abstract. I know we've waited. But the truth is, there is no perfect timing. There's only the right people. And you're my people. All of you." He opened the box. "So, would you make it official? Would you marry me?" Leo let out a tiny gasp. Mateo whispered, "Say yes, Mom." Sienna blinked, then laughed, then cried all at once. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course." The boys whooped and jumped out of their seats, knocking over a glass of juice and nearly toppling the chessboard again. Graham stood and pulled Sienna into a hug as the boys wrapped their arms around both of them. The sky above was turning deep blue. The stars had begun to show. Later that night, when the house had grown quiet and the boys were fast asleep, Graham walked into Lily's room. He stood there for a moment, surrounded by her favorite books, the glowing stars on the ceiling, and the toy car that still sat on the shelf above the bed. He smiled softly, reached out, and gently touched the car's roof. "You brought them to me," he whispered. Then he turned off the light and closed the door. Not to hide it, not to forget, but to carry it with him into the future that had finally found its way home. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the grand old mansion, spilling golden light across the kitchen, where the scent of cinnamon and apples floated through the air. Sienna stood barefoot at the counter, slicing fruit for breakfast, while Mateo sat nearby sketching a new idea for the second version of their wind-powered car. Leo was on the floor with an open box of cereal, pretending to read the ingredients aloud in a dramatic voice like a game show announcer. Graham entered quietly behind them, hair slightly tousled from sleep, a rare thing for a man once known for being dressed by 5:30 and reviewing stock trends by 6. He paused for a moment, watching them, arms crossed over his chest, an easy smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. These mornings were the ones he had once believed he would never have again. Sienna looked up and smiled. "You slept in." "Only because someone kept stealing the covers," he said, nudging her with his elbow. She shrugged playfully. "You have too many anyway. I evened the odds." Mateo looked up from his sketch pad. "Are we still going to the courthouse today?" "We are," Graham said. 3:00. Don't forget your good shoes." "Do we have to wear the matching shirts?" Leo groaned from the floor. "It's not even a wedding." "No, but it is something important," Sienna said, handing Graham a warm mug of coffee. "It's about names." Mateo blinked. "Like last names?" Graham nodded. "Yes, I wanted to talk to both of you about something." The twins sat up straighter. The room grew a little quieter. Graham pulled out a chair and sat across from them. Right now, you both have your mom's last name. Torres. It's a good name. Strong. But after your mom and I get married, I'll be your stepfather officially. And I was thinking... He glanced at Sienna, who gave him a small nod. I'd like to offer you the choice to carry my name too. Everett. Only if you want to. Not because you have to. Not because of anything legal, but because you are family. And I would be proud if that was reflected in your name as much as it's reflected in my heart. Leo was quiet for a long moment. He set the cereal box down. Mateo turned his pencil slowly between his fingers. So we'd be Everett Torres? Mateo asked. You can be that. Or just Everett, or keep Torres. It's your decision. We can talk about it as long as you want. Leo looked up at Graham. What would it mean if we were Everett too? It would mean we're even more officially connected. Like putting it in ink instead of just saying it out loud. But who you are doesn't change, no matter what name you write down. I think I want it, Mateo said quietly, not just because of you, but because of Lily. I think she'd be okay with us carrying the name too. Graham blinked, surprised by the depth in Mateo's words. Leo nodded. I want it too. I want people to know who we belong to, who belongs to us. Sienna watched the exchange, her throat tight. She remembered the first night she had met Graham, how formal and distant he had seemed. And she remembered the way his hands trembled the first time he held hers in the hospital hallway, when the fear of losing everything had still clung to both of them. This man sitting at her table offering his name not like a brand, but like a gift, was not the man the world had whispered about in boardrooms. He was something better, something real. At 3 o'clock, they stepped into the soft glow of the courthouse building downtown. The clerk behind the glass window smiled at them and slid the papers forward. Leo stood on his tiptoes to sign the forms, his handwriting crooked but proud. Mateo leaned hard into the pen, printing each letter with care. Sienna signed next, and then Graham. When the last signature was made, the clerk stamped the documents and slid them into an envelope. Congratulations, she said, beaming. Everett Torres. That's a good name. Sounds like something that belongs on blueprints or book covers. Mateo lit up. Or on a rocket. Leo nodded. Definitely a rocket. Afterward, they stopped for ice cream, walking down the Embarcadero together as the breeze from the bay danced around them. Tourists passed with cameras and paper maps, but Graham barely noticed them. The boys walked slightly ahead, one on either side of Sienna, who held Graham's hand loosely. At one point, Mateo turned back. Hey, Dad, he called. The word struck Graham like a sunrise. He had been called many things in his life. Mr. Everett, Sir, Chairman, CEO. But this was the one that made everything else feel small. Yeah, he replied, catching up. Can we get 2 scoops instead of 1? Only if I get 3, Graham said. Leo groaned. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Graham said. But today it is pretty good. They returned home that evening, just as the sky began to turn soft with the pink glow of sunset. Mrs. Loring had decorated the dining room with a small banner that read, Welcome home Everett Torres family, in blocky painted letters. Sienna paused in the doorway, blinking away surprise. Did you plan this? She whispered to Graham. No, he said, smiling. They did. Dinner that night was loud and filled with stories, jokes, and plans. Leo suggested designing a family crest. Mateo wanted matching jackets. Graham wrote the boys' new names on the chalkboard wall in the kitchen and stood back as they added doodles and stars around them. Sienna sat on the couch later, watching her family move around the house like pieces that had always belonged together. Her sketchbook lay in her lap, open to a new page. At the top, she had written 3 words, The Everett Torres Home. Later that night, after the boys were asleep and the house was quiet again, Graham walked through the hallway and stopped in front of Lily's room. He pushed the door open, slowly stepping inside. Everything remained in its place, the bookshelf, the star-covered ceiling, the soft light of the moon lamp in the corner. He walked to the shelf above her bed and picked up the red toy car. He held it in his palm for a moment, then carried it to the hallway. At the end of the corridor outside the room where the boys now slept, Graham placed the toy car gently on a small table beside the door. It belonged there now, not as a memory of something lost, but as a bridge to what had been found. In the dim light, the little red car gleamed its wheels, still smooth its roof, still scratched with the years it had endured. And now it sat at the center of something entirely new. A family, a future, a second chance that had chosen them all. The house was still, but inside it, life thrived, messy, loud, unpredictable, beautiful. And Graham Everett knew without a doubt that the most important thing he had ever built was not a company. It was the sound of Mateo and Leo saying goodnight through the walls. It was the feel of Sienna's hand in his. It was the name Everett Torres written in crayon and chalk and love across every corner of a home that finally felt full. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. Sometimes the quietest moments hold the deepest truths. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. We read every word. And if you believe in stories that speak of kindness, second chances, and the strength of family, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. Your next emotional journey is just one click away. Tap the video on your screen now. We promise it's one you won't forget. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story.